Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Kata, and today I'm going to be talking about how you feed your shadow side and also about how we feed our spirit side. And I realized this, of course, with my own personal experience. I just actually really started looking at like how I was, feeding my soul and how I was feeding the shadow side, the part of myself that is afraid, that doesn't want to take risks, the part of myself that is egocentrical and narcissistic, and the part of myself, that shadow part. Honestly, I don't even know if my shadow's narcissistic. I want to say just more like afraid. My shadow is just fear, like a deep-seated fear. And a lot of people have a lot of fear in their shadow, and that is why we shove it down. It's because we don't want to look at the things that we're afraid of, because we're afraid that it might trigger us in some kind of way, or it might set us off, or it might just really open up a can of worms you don't want to open. So a lot of times we don't want to open that can of worms, and we should. I've done a lot of deep shadow work over the last couple of years, moving more like into 3 years now. And all of the shadow work that I've done has been actually not about pushing away and like shunning and disowning my shadow, but quite the opposite, having to face my shadow and sit in it and like acknowledge that that is a part of me, it's a part of myself, and that really how I integrate the shadow into my light is by loving it and by recognizing and acknowledging the flaws, the fears, the different things that I have in there, nicely packaged, and looking at it and just really, really learning to love it. I despised my shadow. I hated certain things about myself. I couldn't accept many, many things about myself. And all of that was actually only feeding my shadow. It wasn't helping my spirit grow. It wasn't helping me to expand or to like feel better about myself. It was definitely to my detriment. Like it was just really keeping me in a low, stuck state where I couldn't expand, I couldn't grow, I couldn't move out of that place, because I had so much like resentment for my shadow and so much hate for it, and just really wished, all the time that I could just like, why can't I just, know exactly what I need to do, or just have the courage to do what I need to do, like. And we don't, because because the shadow's not ready yet to like look at all those things, and that is a part of the integration cycle. I'm realizing is that like we have to go in it. I was trying to like go around it and over and under and avoid it in every direction, and then I realized I can't keep running from my shadow. I'm gonna have to like face it, and I'm gonna have to really connect to it and figure out why there is so much in there, and why I actually disown it in the first place. Like, what am I supposed to be, perfect? Right? Like, I realized I was living in this illusion, which of course only fed my shadow more, but I was living in this illusion of like that the shadow side of us and the bad parts of ourselves were just like not lovable. And that's something that we teach our children in society. We still do this. This is something that we generationally kind of spread from one generation to the next. So it's definitely something that it's time to look at, in the sense that when you're willing to take that step, and when you're willing to start acknowledging and recognizing how you feed your shadow versus how you're feeding your spirit, and which one feels better, when you start to kind of play with this little game, and figure yourself out. This is all about like self-mastery, essentially, right? Figuring your shadow out, learning to love it, knowing what parts are in your shadow. These are all a part of self-mastery. So yeah, to really help you understand, I came up with some examples, and these are just some examples that I have definitely had, for sure, things that have like crossed my path or my life, things that I've dealt with and have done, but there are also things that are just kind of quite common, to be honest. So my shadow has, I think, a lot in common with your shadow. So first of all, I'm going to say how you feed the shadow. These are different things that we do to feed our shadow. And the very, very, very first one is negative thinking. It's the very first one. And negative thinking is the finest way to feed the shadow because it's constant. It's constant nourishment for the shadow, right? So the more you allow negative thoughts and feelings and different ideas about your stories, that you tell yourself, and ideas that you allow to circulate within your mind, the more you allow that negative thinking to happen, the more it's absolute fuel for the shadow, and you're just giving it more and more and more. And here you go, here's some more shit, and then go hide, right? So our negative thinking, and this is something I found to be the most important thing, it's what trips me up the most in life, and it's what prevents me from taking action. It's what prevents me from moving forward. It's what prevents me from expanding, from growing my life, is the negative thinking. So that being said, that has to be addressed. It has to be the very first thing that you start paying attention to and start realizing, like, oh, fuck, didn't have very nice thoughts about myself. Like, I actually viscerally felt it. I don't know, I did something stupid yesterday, and then I had this thought of myself, I'm like, loser, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, I can't believe I just called myself a loser because I did something silly. Like, I completely caught it right away, and it actually pissed me off that, like, you little fucker, it's like chirping in there, calling me a loser, how dare it. So I'm really, really paying attention and noticing when my shadow is speaking and when the little devil on my shoulder is speaking. And I'm really, really noticing when the angel sounds her trumpet and when she starts to speak and when she starts to give me information and feeding me the right fuel that my spirit needs. You'll see the difference. So negative thinking, like I said, is the very, very first one. It is the most common, biggest issue for everyone because we all do it. We all do it to different degrees, of course. Number 2 I actually wrote down was a self-destructive diet. And I wrote the diet down as the second thing because I find that the way I eat highly influences my mood. It influences how I feel. It influences like how I'm physically, how much energy I physically have or don't have. So being extremely selective now with my diet and really paying attention to the things that are triggering different inflammation and different things in my body, and paying attention to what actually fuels my body and really, really feels good to it. So diet is like very, very important after the negative thinking, because thinking is something that you do from the moment you basically open your eyes in the morning till the time, until the minute, and even when you're in bed, you're still thinking. So, thinking is something that we do the most of. And that's why that is the number one thing that has to be first corrected if you don't want to continue feeding your shadow and you want to start feeding your spirit. And then the self-destructive diet is the physical aspect of it. So that's the physical embodiment of how you nourish yourself, how you feed yourself, right? And whether you give your body the fuel that it actually needs to be strong and to be fit and to keep going, or are you just like kind of, gluttony and whatever, like, are you just scarfing anything and everything down just to fill your belly, and you don't give a shit whether that has any nutritional value or not? And it's super sad. And it's not to say I'm not judging anybody, because I used to eat shit food too. I still do. I'm still not perfect with like how I eat. Perfection doesn't exist, by the way. It's just simply calibrating the diet and figuring out what actually truly feeds your body and keeps you healthy and thin the way that we are naturally meant to be. But if you are someone that, right now is like McDonald's and like, you eat just to fill your belly, then that means you're not conscious enough. You're actually not connected to your physicality and yourself enough to understand that like just feeding your belly is not nutrition. That's just putting calories into the body so that the body has fuel to burn. But if that fuel quality is poor, just the way that you would put gas in your car, if the fuel quality is poor, then you're going to be feeding your shadow. And then that's perpetuating, like I said, like the bad moods and like mood swings and feeling lethargic and tired and unmotivated. There's so many different things that I noticed with how I eat. Like I started having a little bit of gluten again. just recently, just to see kind of like how I would feel from it. And oh my God, like I absolutely hate it. I can see it already. I'm waking up in the morning. I have puffiness in my face again, all around my eyes. I'm like, holy shit, like this is like 2 or 3 days of me having toast. Like, come on. But that's what it is, right? And that's how my body's responding to gluten right now. That means I gotta fucking stop eating it, whether I want to or not. And whether I like it or not, I have to stop eating it. I have to have enough self control to say, this is not good for me. And I'm going to choose other forms of carbs or other things that are going to be good for me. So yeah, in addition to the self-destructive diet, another way to feed your shadow is maintaining addiction to drugs and alcohol. Now, addiction is obviously massively feeding the shadow side. But the thing with addiction is that most people are addicted. Why? Because they're trying to suppress something. What are they trying to suppress? Their shadow, usually. It's a bit of a catch-22 there, but it doesn't really work. So yeah, so it's like you're in this like circle. It's an endless cycle, actually, a loop, if you will, that you can't get out of. But addiction comes from you not loving yourself in the first place, from you not knowing how to fill your own cup. So people that are smoking tons and tons of weed, and you know, maybe you're really into beer or whatever, like if you know that you're taking these substances to kind of like numb out, then you got to ask yourself, like, what the fuck am I running from? Like, what am I running from? Myself? Is it the work that I know I need to put in to myself to, you know, maybe get my life moving forward? Like, addiction is a really, really tough one. But like when you know, and everyone knows, once again, okay, I have suffered addiction. Everyone knows when they are addicted to something. And when you are addicted to something, then you have to be willing to get help. You have to like force yourself and push yourself to go and get help, because a lot of times we're afraid of the work. We're afraid to like actually go through the withdrawal. We're afraid to like go through the separation from that thing that, you know, maybe made you feel good at the time, right? And we're afraid of the pain of that thing not being in our lives anymore. But in reality, that thing is what is causing, like the addiction is what is causing the pain in your life to begin with, because it doesn't allow you to move forward. It just keeps you so fucking stuck. So I've worked with people with addictions, some people with very, very heavy addictions like Coke and you know, amphetamines and like all the different types of like crazy shit, you know, and they all had the same kind of thing to say. Like they all said the same thing. They're basically battling themselves, right? When we're in addiction, we battle ourselves. So it's, and it can be very, very trapping. So it's very important to try and get help. I didn't get help too for the longest time, and I'm not going to talk about my addiction just yet. I'm not ready to do that. But I didn't get help with my addiction. I kind of went through the process by myself, and I just decided to to just stop. Like I realized how bad it was affecting my life, how much it was destroying my life. And I knew it wasn't sustainable. I knew it wasn't something I could keep doing. And I also knew that I was only doing it because I really was just, it was my crutch, right? Just like it is for everyone. And addiction is always a crutch, right? So, but yeah, I've made like leaps and bounds, like huge progress and stuff. And let me tell you, like being on the other side is a very different story. And I know like it probably dragged out so much longer than it needed to, simply because I didn't know how to get help. I was too ashamed to get help. And quite frankly, I didn't really know where to turn to get help. So, and then meditation kind of came into my life, and I started doing that, and that changed a whole bunch of things in the way that I perceive things up here. So yeah, addiction to drugs and alcohol is definitely a form of feeding the spirit. Another way is another thing that feeds the shadow. Sorry, not the spirit, the shadow. The other thing that feeds the shadow is saying that like being and like feeling too lazy to work out. Now, I'm talking about working out here because I know working out is also a huge part of self-care. Actually, most of these things are, if I really think about it, is a massive part of self-care, which means that we need exercise. We know that we need to move. We know that we're meant to move. Our bodies are designed that way. We're meant to exert energy, because exerting energy actually creates more energy in the body. So we're aware of these things, and yet so many people don't exercise. And like, guilty as charged right here. Like, I'm not gonna pretend like, oh, I've been so good and exercising my whole life. No, I haven't been. I have been. I've only been, like, I definitely did a lot of working out, and I was super consistent with the gym and stuff, like in my 20s. And then, to be honest, like in my 30s, like the workout scene was like kind of a shit show. I did have a baby at the end of my 20s. So after that, like, things just kind of changed. Your body changes, and, weight loss and gain is kind of a different ball game at that point. But there was just so many times where I knew I was just too lazy to work out, where I knew that, like, hey, if I just did this, I would probably feel so much better. I'd be like so much more energized and like in a better mood and feeling good and all this stuff. And then I just wouldn't do it, because it was just like, yeah, that would be great, but then I'd just sit there and sit on my ass and watch something instead. So I know when I'm lazy to work out, and I know that when you're lazy to work out. So this is me encouraging you, like, hey, do you want to keep feeding your shadow? Do you want to keep, like, allowing your shadow to whisper, like, not today, maybe tomorrow, right? Because the shadow does that. It doesn't scream necessarily in your ear. Sometimes it just whispers, like, not today, right? And that's all it needs to, that's all that needs to happen, that one little thought, and all of a sudden you're like, boom, and you're already abandoning the workout, tossing the shoes aside, and you're going back to the couch, right? That's all it takes. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention for how you feed your shadow, and of course there's like probably hundreds and thousands of ways to feed your shadow. These are just some basic things that I came up with that I know we all do. And the last one is excuses instead of taking responsibility. So when you're coming up with excuses, whether that's an excuse to work out, an excuse to have some drugs, an excuse to have your destructive diet or that extra cupcake or whatever else, excuses are always, just remind yourself, every time I come up with an excuse, I'm really just avoiding taking responsibility for myself. Now, does that serve me? Does that serve my spirit to avoid taking responsibility for things that I've already done? Of course not. And you know that it doesn't. And then it grinds away in your subconscious in the back. It just kind of sits there and like picks at you, every so often, because that's what it does. And we know that's what it does. So instead of coming up with excuses, and I'm going to get to how you feed your spirit in a minute, which we'll then explain. But instead of, coming up with those excuses, can you actually take responsibility? Can you just own it and own yourself? Now, how do you feed your spirit? This is definitely, there's an answer to everything I just said about the shadow. So how you feed your spirit is the number one, the negative thinking that I talked about. How you feed your spirit is daily positive affirmations to reprogram your mind. I'm noticing that if I don't do them, the mind goes right back to the cycle that it's used to. It goes right back into the negative thinking, into the way that it wants to process things. It's what it's used to, right? But if I use these affirmations, and I have very, very specific affirmations, then I can take those affirmations and reading them out loud and like really feeling them as I'm saying them it's doing something, man. Like, it's doing something. Something is getting rewired in the mind for sure, because I can feel it. I feel it in the mornings now when I wake up. There's like an excitement that I feel rather than a dread. So that's a huge bonus. But yeah, the daily positive affirmations are very important, and I would suggest to do them in the morning, because when you start your day with with those positive affirmations, you're like kind of setting the stage for the whole day energetically in terms of how you're going to feel about it and how you're going to perceive it. So definitely do it in the morning. Find new recipes. The other thing was like the self-destructive diet. You counter that and you feed your spirit by finding new recipes online for breakfast, lunch, and dinner ideas. I have so many people who tell me and come up with the excuses that they don't eat well because they don't know what to cook well. You're not going to know if you just keep scrolling Facebook. So my suggestion to you is going to be to find recipes online. I don't care if you're a man or a woman, if you live by yourself or if you live in a family, it doesn't matter. Don't come up with excuses. They're like, today, in the age of the internet, where we have access to literally anything in terms of information, there's just really no excuse nowadays, man. There's people like on Instagram and YouTube and all over the place, all over online, who have so many amazing, delicious, brilliant ideas that, like, and just recipes. That's what I do. I just search online, whatever is appealing to me, whatever has the ingredients that I genuinely enjoy eating, that are healthy, the right veggies, the right stuff, the right proteins. I'll just make the recipe. Like, I'll look for one and I'll make it. And I always look for things that are simple. I don't overcomplicate my diet at all. It's not necessary. I just really keep to what I know feeds me truly, and I enjoy eating it. That's like a huge part of it. You have to love the taste of the food that you're eating, because then you're so much more likely to keep eating it and to keep making it and to keep testing those recipes, potentially even tweaking them so to your taste. So find some new recipes and then you'll start to make better food choices. The next one is with the addiction that I mentioned. So if feeding the shadow means maintaining addiction to drugs and alcohol, then feeding your spirit means get addicted to something healthy. So addiction sometimes needs to be replaced with addiction, I find. And what you can do is you replace the addiction by truly getting addicted to something else, but something that is truly positive for you and it feeds your spirit, your soul, your mind, your heart, your everything. Like working out, for example. That's a really good addiction to have, to work out, because it's just good for you. And then the feeding the shadow, if you're too lazy to work out, then start each day with a walk outside. Pick up the pace each day until you can power walk. This is something that I also tried and have had huge success with. I wanted to work myself back up to running. I used to run, or jog, we'll say. I used to jog pretty regularly a few years ago now. And through the pandemic and stuff, like everything just stopped. But what I started to do now is, like, I'm out every day and I go for my walks every day, but I'm trying to go faster. I'm picking up the speed. I'm putting more power into it. I'm finding more areas to walk where I can be more on an incline, or I'll specifically like go for a hike in the forest. Like, really, walking is so simple, and I find it makes a big difference. I actually sold my treadmill because I had a treadmill and I sold it, and now I only walk outside. I actually find there's a very big difference energetically when you're walking outside and versus inside, outside versus inside. And it feeds, like, just the fact that I'm connecting to nature first thing in the morning. As soon as I get up, it's like I greet the world by going out and taking that walk. And that feeling in itself feeds and nurtures my soul. Like, great, like, no treadmill walk or no, like at the gym, like, it's just not even close to the same vibe. So walk outside. And then the last one to feed your spirit is reverse your excuses. Something I'm also practicing at the moment. So instead of the I can't, how about I can? And just what you can even do, and this is something I was thinking to do for myself, is to write down your excuses and be honest with yourself. Like, write down all of the excuses for everything. Why you don't have more money, why you're not as healthy as you'd like to be, why you're not as fit as you'd like to be, why you're not as in shape, or whatever. Like, why you're not as good of a mother or father as you think you should be, or whatever. Like, just write everything down that you think, and then I'll write the reverse of it, like flip it. You know what I'm saying? And then write down all of the flipped versions of, so like, what if you could do those things? Then what would you say? What would you write down? And then you would indicate, like, oh, I don't know. Just anything that's an I can't, you make an I can. That's what I have been doing. So if I say I can't edit videos, then I say, no, I can't, but I can learn. And that's an I can. Do you see what I'm saying? So anything that you think you cannot do because you don't have the skills, the knowledge, the expertise, the whatever, then just know that those things that maybe you can't actually do those things right now, but you can learn and you can start learning. And then already you can eliminate the I can't do this because now you're learning how to do that. So now you take that sentence, completely delete, and then you say, I'm learning how to edit videos, XYZ, right? So that's how it goes. It's really simple. Just be mindful of what you are feeding at all times. And I know that can seem like, oh my God, do I have to like monitor my thoughts like constantly? No, you don't actually have to monitor your thoughts constantly. But what I would suggest that you do is just be aware. Like my awareness is what helps me to keep picking up on those different things. Like, for example, how I feed my shadow. And then I realize how I'm feeding my shadow. And then it just makes me want to counter that and change the way that I have been feeding my shadow. So, and now I'm really looking at how I can feed my soul and my spirit instead of my shadow. So it's just taking energy that I have allocated and have given to my shadow, and now I'm pulling that energy back and I'm now allocating it to my spirit. So I'm now shifting out my activities to do things that feed and nurture my soul. It's not complicated, but it's hard to do because sometimes we get so used to the shadow parts of ourselves that we fully live out of the shadow parts of ourselves. So we're basically constantly in fear. We're constantly in fight and flight. And we literally don't know how to exist in peace. We don't know how to exist in just being. And this is something that I definitely know that I've struggled with for much of my life. I have had so many fucking situations of fight and flight in my life that it became my autopilot. So I was just constantly running off of fight and flight, like basically stress constantly. And having to learn and having to go through, like, because of all the shadow integration I did in these past 2.5 years, like I'm really just getting to the other side of it now, where I'm seeing how I can completely embrace my shadow now. And it's like she's shrinking. My shadow is getting smaller and smaller. And it's really, really cute because I actually love her and I see her clearly for who she is. And I understand that so much of my shadow was inflated because of this fight and flight situations that I was constantly in, that I had to really learn to survive in and learn to basically stay in my shadow in order to keep myself protected and safe. Right? But now I'm recognizing how much more safety and how much more power there is in actually being in my spirit instead of my shadow. And it's making a huge difference. But nonetheless, it's not an easy process to go through. Like, shit, when you finally get to the other side of it, all I can say is just do that. Pat yourself on the back or on the shoulder, because anybody that does this kind of work and is willing to go through this kind of work, in my eyes, is a hero, because this is the process of life, of going through, sorting out who you are, figuring it out, and then choosing and deciding which one you want to be a part of more, which one you want to embody more. Is that your soul, your spirit, your higher self, the angelic version of yourself, or is it the shadow side of yourself? The choice is yours. Today, tomorrow, and always. Just remember that. And it doesn't matter how hard it is, and it doesn't matter how many steps it takes. Just know that you're going to get there as long as you keep going. Take it from someone who is still going. I love you guys. Take care.